The moment I heard those heavy boots strike against the cool tile of our entryway floor, I felt something twist deep in my chest. It wasn't the sound of neighbors dropping by or delivery men fumbling with packages. This was different, deliberate, a cadence that carried more threat than courtesy. That night, our quiet routine shattered, and what should have been nothing more than a trivial HOA dispute suddenly escalated into a siege on our home. It had all begun innocuously enough. We'd only been in the neighborhood a week when the first notice slipped under our door. Its bold block letters screamed like an accusation. HOA Regulation 8, 4, Unauthorized Plant Display. The crime? A single lavender plant in a weathered terracotta pot I'd set by the porch. I almost laughed when I read it. What's next? An arrest warrant for watering it too loudly? I joked, holding it up to Claire. Claire didn't laugh. She was a former Army Ranger turned Green Beret sniper, someone who'd seen bureaucracy mask power before. She held the notice like a field report, eyes narrowing in calculation. It's never about the plant, she said, almost to herself. Our son Noah didn't even look up from his game console. Wi-Fi and snacks were the borders of his universe, and so long as they remained intact, he believed himself untouchable. 2 days later came the second notice. This one was different. It had been stapled to our gate with a grainy nighttime photo of that same lavender, framed in the crosshairs of a zoom lens. Claire didn't toss it away. Instead, she taped it to the fridge like a warning flare. "They're watching," she muttered. For the first time, the air inside our home felt heavy. Then came Linda. She was the HOA compliance officer, or so her clipboard declared. She arrived unannounced in a khaki polo and mirrored sunglasses that reflected our home like a one-way mirror, without PR. "Eamble," she announced. "We're here to enforce final compliance." Claire stepped forward with the calm poise of someone who had stared down worse. "Final compliance? Let me know when the board sends someone taller than your clipboard." Linda's lips twitched into the faintest smile. Or maybe it was a threat. She made no retort, only narrowed her eyes before turning and walking briskly down the sidewalk. But Claire didn't relax. That night, she ran our family through a defense drill. I thought she was joking at first. Noah wore a bike helmet and clutched a garden rake. Claire handed him a foam pool noodle as if it were a rifle. "Sweep, roll, clear," she instructed, her voice clipped like a drill sergeant's. Noah groaned, muttering about how ridiculous it all was. But when Claire demonstrated a textbook low crawl beneath the hedges, her movements efficient and predatory, even he fell silent. "This isn't a war zone," he said. "Neither was Fallujah," she replied, voice steady. I caught her gaze then, hard, calculating. Claire wasn't imagining threats, she was anticipating them. 3 more letters arrived in the span of a week. Fines stacked up. A bright red sticker, stamped "Final Review," was slapped across our door like a scarlet brand. Each escalation tightened the knot in my gut. The yard no longer felt like a home. It felt like a staging ground. And then came the silence. The dog stopped barking. The streetlights flickered, one by one, plunging the cul-de-sac into a strange half-dark. Even the lamps inside our hallway dimmed as though someone had flipped a hidden switch. And then I heard it. 3 pairs of boots, slow, deliberate, striding across the lawn. They didn't knock. They didn't announce themselves. They simply lined up at our door, 3 dark figures in tactical vests, their shadows stretching long across the porch. My breath froze in my chest. Noah, wide-eyed, lifted his phone, recording. Claire crouched beside me, whispering with the same calm she had used in combat zones. "Watch their hands." The lead man's voice boomed against the door. "You are in violation of HOA Rule 8. 4. We will begin final eviction proceedings." And that was when Claire stepped forward. Her arms hung loose at her sides, her eyes locked on the intruders. In that instant, the house was no longer mine, nor Noah's. It was her battlefield. "Final proceedings?" she echoed, her tone sharp as a knife. "That's a big phrase for someone wearing knockoff Oakleys." The men hesitated. One shifted his stance. Another swept his gaze over the flower beds. But before they could advance, the sprinklers erupted, only it wasn't water that burst into the air. A fine white chalk mist filled the porch like a sudden storm. The men coughed, blinded, staggering as Claire moved. She moved like a shadow. One swift twist disarmed the first man and had his wrists zip-tied before his weapon hit the ground. Two more steps, two more ties. The third man dropped his radio, choking on chalk dust as Claire drove him to his knees. Noah gasped. My heart thundered. And in that blinding storm of chalk and chaos, one truth crystallized. This wasn't a neighborhood dispute anymore. This was a test, and Claire had just given them their answer. The three subdued enforcers knelt zip-tied on our porch, their tactical vests coated in a fine layer of chalk like statues of some fallen militia. Their radios hissed, cutting in and out, as if the very frequency they operated on had been jammed. Noah's camera phone shook in his hands as he whispered, "Mom, what just happened?" Claire didn't answer immediately. "Sis." He crouched low, stripping a patch from one man's vest. No insignia, no unit name, just a generic shield-shaped badge with 3 letters embossed in cheap vinyl. HOA. She turned it over in her palm as though it were a foreign coin. "They're probing us," she said finally, her tone almost casual. "This wasn't meant to win. It was meant to see how we'd react." Busko. So, that night, long after I thought the confrontation was over, I woke to the sound of boots again, only this time, they weren't on our tile. They were out in the street, pacing in slow circles like wolves testing the fence line. The sound faded, but sleep never returned. By morning, the HOA delivered its cover story. Flyers appeared on every doorstep, slick and glossy, with the official logo stamped at the bottom. Emergency drill completed. Thank you for your calm cooperation. Neighbors walked past our yard exchanging uneasy glances, whispers trailing behind them like smoke. Some avoided looking at us entirely, as though acknowledging what they'd seen might draw the HOA's wrath onto them, but Claire wasn't shaken. She was energized. At the dining table, she pulled up the HOA portal on her laptop, typing with the precision of a soldier assembling a weapon. Within minutes, she was inside their financial records, bypassing security protocols that had likely cost thousands to install. Her eyes flicked across the data. Invoices to shell companies, private security, surveillance upgrades. She paused, scrolling. Here, Sentinel Ridge Defense. That's where your dues are going, except, she angled the screen toward me. It doesn't exist. I spread the HOA's official meeting minutes across the table, stapled and signed by their president, Linda Crossman. Each document authorized enforcement authority without oversight, each motion rubber-stamped by a faceless board. The pattern was unmistakable. 3 steps. Recon. Escalate. Ion. Test. And we were moving toward the 4th. That evening, we set up our counter-surveillance. Claire wired motion sensors into the porch beams, their signals feeding into a laptop upstairs. Noah stuffed a covert camera inside the hollow belly of a ceramic garden gnome. For once, the boy who lived for video games now treated this like the ultimate co-op mission. He taped a GoPro to his toy drone and submerged it in the birdbath for camouflage. "This thing actually works," he grinned, his voice betraying pride instead of fear. At precisely 9 p.m., a booming voice echoed down the block. "For your safety, the HOA has initiated a scheduled exercise." The announcement wasn't made by a human being at all, but by a boxy loudspeaker hoisted onto a pickup roof. From our window, we saw them, 4 men in black gear, pacing driveways, their presence less about order and more about intimidation. Claire lifted her binoculars and studied them as though she were back in some Middle Eastern city scoping rooftops. "No authority," she murmured. "Just theater, just intimidation." And then she told me the part I hadn't yet admitted to myself. The next act will be bloodier. That night, we released our own counterstrike, raw footage uploaded directly online. Noah cut together the chalk storm, the zip-tied men, the uniforms marked HOA Tactical Unit. The video spread like wildfire, comment threads igniting with outrage. "Is this America? Since when does an HOA get its own SWAT team?" Local journalists called, influencers retweeted. But just as quickly, the counter-narrative surfaced. Fake accounts flooded the forums. They attacked first. It was drug dealers. HOA saved the neighborhood. It was digital warfare now. By midnight, Claire had mapped it all on the whiteboard in our garage. Unauthorized plant probe, tactical harassment test, information control war. Next phase, forced compliance. She underlined the last 2 words twice. Outside, the night was still. Too still. I knew what that meant. Somewhere beyond the cul-de-sac, engines idled. Somewhere in the darkness, headlights waited to flare. Claire turned to me then, her voice steel. They're not done, and neither are we. The quiet didn't last. At 2:37 a.m., the cul-de-sac erupted in blinding white light. 6 SUVs rolled in without plates, arranged in a predatory triangle around our lawn. Floodlights snapped on, swallowing the house in artificial daylight. From hidden speakers came a low, rolling boom. Submit or be evicted. Noah scrambled to his station at the window, headphones pressed tight. Claire stood in the hallway with her vest strapped, her rifle slung, and the calm authority of a woman who had faced worse. I was already at the porch, hand gripping the lever to our sprinkler chalk rig. The plan was simple: blind them, confuse them, record everything. When the boots advanced, slow and deliberate, Claire flicked the switch. The sprinklers hissed to life, ejecting fine chalk mist into the path of the marchers. I triggered the net trap, the weighted mesh dropping across our porch like a giant's hand. 2 operatives tangled immediately, radios crackling nonsense. Noah launched his drone, its buzzing wings dive-bombing the lead SUV before tearing the GPS antenna from its roof. Panic rippled through the formation. Orders shouted, lights sweeping, but cameras, hundreds of them, lit up from our neighbors' hands. People poured into the street, their phones recording every moment. For the first time, the HOA's private army was being seen for what it was. "Stop! You have no warrant!" I shouted, waving the glossy eviction notice we'd received that morning. Claire raised her voice over the chaos, calm and commanding. "This neighborhood belongs to its residents, not to your board." That was the breaking point. Officers staggered in chalk clouds, neighbors yelling, children crying. The so-called HOA tactical unit melted into retreat, pulling their men free, abandoning SUVs in their haste. Stay. By sunrise, they were gone, but the damage was irreversible. Footage spread across the county. Every outlet carried it. Chalk clouds, net traps, mothers screaming at masked men with rifles. The narrative spun out of the HOA's control. Anonymous leaks flooded forums. Audits, secret transfers of community dues to offshore accounts, embezzlement trails pointing straight to Linda Crossman. And yet, Claire knew it wasn't over. "They don't walk away from this," she said, standing over the maps and surveillance feeds we had spread across the barn loft. "They regroup, they rebrand, they come back harder." Her prediction came true faster than I expected. At 11 p.m., the night after the raid, a new message spread across every phone in the neighborhood. Final notice: eviction orders executed at 0600 hours. Property seized for code violations. The HOA wasn't going to rely on shadows anymore. They were bringing an army. The night before the eviction was scheduled, Claire gathered us in the yard. The air was sharp and tense, the kind of silence soldiers recognize before artillery. She checked her rifles with mechanical precision, her hands steady even as mine trembled. Noah wore his headphones, drone batteries charging by the barn. "This ends tomorrow," Claire said, her voice flat, controlled. "They'll come for the house, but they'll have to get through us first." I wanted to protest, to tell her this wasn't worth it, that we could walk away. But the truth hung heavier than fear. If we gave in, it wouldn't stop with us. They'd own every family on this street. At exactly 0600, flashbangs detonated outside our windows, rattling glass and tearing the morning into fragments of light and sound. Boots thundered on the porch, radios screamed orders. Claire snapped her goggles into place and in one swift motion triggered the first line of defense. Chalk stormed from the sprinklers, clouding the porch in a blizzard. I yanked the lever for the gabled net, dropping it across the doorway. 2 operatives went down, thrashing in its coils. Noah's drone zipped across the lawn, dive-bombing their command van, tearing its antenna free with a spark of electricity. Chaos followed. Radios died. Floodlights blinked out. Neighbors ran into the street, filming, shouting, demanding warrants. "This is illegal. This is our home." Their voices mixed with the shrieks of chalk-blinded men. Then came Claire, calm, poised, a rifle slung but not raised, her voice cutting through the panic like a blade. "We are residents. We are citizens. And this war you brought to our door ends today." In that moment, the momentum shifted. The HOA's squad, so sure of their intimidation, collapsed under the weight of exposure. One by one, they retreated, dragging their own through clouds of chalk, leaving behind SUVs, broken gear, and the echoes of a failed siege. By noon, the county prosecutor had opened an inquiry. Linda Crossman's digital channels overflowed with leaked audits, millions embezzled, funds laundered, contracts signed with phony defense firms. Local news vans swarmed our cul-de-sac. Headlines screamed HOA scandal, private army funded by residents' dues. And yet, even in victory, we felt the lingering presence. At 2 a.m., Boots returned again, fainter this time, hesitant. Claire stood at the window, her rifle resting against her shoulder, eyes cold and unflinching. The message was clear. They could walk onto our porch, but they would never take this home. Not while a Green Beret sniper guarded it. Not while our family stood together. What began as a lavender plant in a terracotta pot had become a war for control. And though the HOA had thrown everything it had at us, it had made one fatal miscalculation. It had forgotten what happens when you threaten a soldier's family.